that we talk about all issues that impact performance athletes, from racism, gender inequity, sex abuse and prevention, nutrition, psychology, dance, medicine, and science, and more. We cover it all. And our goal is to really just educate and provide perspective and resources from guest experts like my friend Jennifer Milner here today, so that we can leave this community better than we found it. There's a lot to hash out when it comes to performance athletes. And that's why we do this show. So, without further ado, you might notice I'm missing my fabulous co-host and friend, Melissa McDaniel Grisham. She is out today. So it is me, and I'm excited to be having this conversation with our dear friend, Jennifer Milner. Jennifer, welcome. How are you?
I am doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me back again.
Oh, it's so
I
wonderful
I
to see
cannot
you.
believe it's your fourth season. I'm so excited.
Four seasons, season four. We couldn't believe it either. We had to take a deep a little double take when we started the season. Is it really 4 years? It has
Yeah.
been. But for those that don't know, this is Jennifer Milner. She's a ballet coach and certified Pilates trainer. After having a very successful performance career, Jennifer became certified in Pilates. She's trained dancers from New York City Ballet, the Kirov Ballet, American Ballet Theater, San Francisco Ballet, all the ballets basically. She's also the founder of the Bendy Bodies podcast, devoted to athletic artists with hypermobility issues, along with our friend, Dr. Linda Bluestein, who we love. She's a member of the International Association of Dance Medicine and Science, otherwise known as IADAMS, and has presented at several world conferences. She's a member of Dance Medica, as are we at Apollo, Doctors for Dancers, and serves on the advisory board of Minding the Gap. You can find her at jennifermilner.com, and I'll make sure to put that information in at the end for you. Jennifer, what has been happening this season? How has it been going for you? What's new?
I think sometimes what's new is that it feels like nothing's new. And we
Which
feel like
can
we're
be the
going through these,
problem. Yeah.
right, like
Yeah.
we're going through these cyclical
Yeah.
of what's happening. Didn't we see that last year? Didn't we try to talk about that?
So
But
true.
um, but also I think what's new is that people are starting to listen to conversations like these and
Yay.
the conversations that you guys try to have. And so in that way, I'm very encouraged. So
Yeah.
hopefully what's new is we're kind of keeping going with getting information out there.
Yeah, that's the blessing and the curse of this industry that we love so much, and
Yeah.
we just, as long as we have people keeping at it and doing the work, that's a good small positive step forward. What is the biggest gap? I always like to ask this of you and Dr. Bluestein in particular when you guys come on, but what is the biggest gap you're seeing in general for dancers right now, as far as training, awareness? What are the trends you're seeing, and the gaps that we're seeing in the dance industry?
Um, I think I think that we're seeing a lot of great information come out in the dance medicine and the dance research, and we're making some really great strides in the research that we're doing and the information that we're getting. And the gap is, how do we get that information to the dance studios, to the dance teachers, and how do we help them make the most of their time?
Yeah.
One of the issues we talk about, or we're seeing a lot of, is, again, everything's kind of cyclical, so these things come back around. But like, for example, for Pilates, it was founded decades ago, and then every 5 to 10 years, it becomes like the hot new trend, right?
Yeah.
And so we see those things go cyclically. And in the dance world, I feel like there's been a great dissemination of information saying dance training is not enough, like dance class is not enough. We can talk about the reasons for that, but I think that that's what we're seeing. And so people need to augment their dance training to have the healthiest, longest careers possible. Um, and then they get so inundated with information, people get confused as to, well, what should I be doing? Like, should I be doing what I see on this Instagram account or on that TikTok?
Yeah.
Or, my schools are telling me to do this, and my coach is telling me to do this. And,
Yeah.
and so I think that big question of, I only have so many hours in the day, what am I supposed to do? Is one that has kind of come up again, unfortunately.
Well, and that's a great segue, because the question, for those that are not familiar with our show, we ask one question under one of the big umbrellas that I named earlier. And we have a guest expert, being Jennifer today, join us to kind of weigh in and provide education and resources. And today we're exploring, what are the differences between conditioning versus cross training? And how do you know which to focus on in your training? You hear these buzzwords all the time, cross training, conditioning, accountability, all the things, but what do they really mean? And how does that apply to a group scenario versus individual? We're going to explore all of that with Jennifer today. So, getting into it, the very basic level, what are the fundamental differences between conditioning and cross training in the context of fitness and exercise?
So there's no hard and fast definition, right? Unless we're looking at the dictionary and trying to see what they say. But some people consider cross training for dancers, for example. Some ballet dancers might consider cross training to be jazz, like they're doing a different genre
Yeah.
of dance style. And that's not exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about cross training. When we're talking about cross training, we're talking about doing something that is a different movement pattern and a different load, a different requirements on the body than dancing. So you could be a great fisherman, but not a great swimmer. They both have to do with the water,
Yeah.
right? But they're two very different things that you're trying to achieve. And so when we're talking about cross training, we're saying, let's do something that doesn't look like dance. And when we're talking about conditioning, it's conditioning used to mean, well, we need to get them in condition. So let's make sure their heart rate is up. Let's make sure they've got enough cardio, that sort of thing. But it's kind of widely accepted now to say conditioning is a little more dance based, and maybe it looks a little bit more like dance. So it might be doing dance type exercises, but with a big physio ball or a small ball or something that just
Interesting.
feels dance adjacent,
Yeah.
and that's valuable. It's just different.
Right. And the reason, I mean, and I'm by no means the scientist here. You are, but the reason we want to do these things and we want to incorporate cross training and conditioning is because dance it has a repetitive nature to it. A
Mhm.
lot of the injuries we see are from overuse, repetitive strain, inflammation, right? Dancers are very much injured due to overuse, because they're doing the same things over and over and over and over. Is that why that this different movement pattern helps us strengthen the other muscles that are maybe being neglected by dance movement?
Absolutely. And when you look at it, it's not just for example, in the Lion King. Okay, I've
Yeah.
worked with some of the dancers from Lion King. The puppetry that they've got, these big, huge things that they're
Yeah.
controlling. It's asymmetrical. One side of the body looks like this big cheetah, and the other side is the arm that controls it.
Yeah.
Right? So they're always going to be using the same arm to lead the puppet in the same way. They can't like switch it
Interesting.
off, right?
Yeah.
So there's going to be an asymmetrical work that goes on with their body, which they need to train against to try to stay healthy. And then at the same time, we also want to say, like, if you're a ballet dancer, it feels so good to walk around with your legs completely turned out in that kind of duck waddle that the ballet
Yeah.
dancers
Yeah.
always do,
You can
but it's
spot it
not
from a
healthy.
mile away. Yeah.
Exactly, but it's not healthy, and so we want to find ways to work in turnout as well because it's better for our hips. It gives more information to our hips to fully use the whole socket and to not just hang out and turn out. So it's going to
Interesting.
make us healthier humans, and it's also going to keep our body in better shape to do the dysfunctional things that we try to do, like stand on our toes or lift a leg up to our ear. So
Yeah.
it may not sound like it's informing our dance, but it is. And more importantly, it's informing our humanity health, the health of our human body.
Yeah. Yeah. When is it more beneficial to focus on conditioning, and when does cross training become a more suitable approach, or is it better to have a balance of the two?
I feel like it's good to have a balance of the two because you can use a big physio ball to find your turnout muscles, right? You can lie down, put your feet on the ball, try turning out, and you'll feel those muscles in a different way. But you're informing how you're going to use the turnout muscles for first position or for a batma. So it's helpful to find the correct muscles, and it's helpful to make that transition from I'm using these muscles, how do I move it into a dancer like pose or a dancer
Yeah.
like movement.
Yeah.
But conditioning is not enough. It's not going to keep you healthy because it is going to be working towards that dance side. And I don't mean it's not going to keep you healthy. We're all going to try to stay healthy, but it's not going to work as efficiently to balance out the other side of it. So I prefer for all of my dancers to do cross training, which is really just training. As my friend Jason Harrison says, he's a fantastic guy who trains a lot of dancers, and he's a strength and conditioning coach.
Love
Um,
it.
and his point of view is, we need to make you stronger, and then you can apply all of that stuff in the studio. It is going to
Yeah.
help keep your joints strong and all of that. And good training, good cross training isn't going to completely disregard what you have to do on stage. So I think a lot of people avoid cross training, avoid strength training, because they're afraid that it's going to make their muscles bigger or make their muscles tighter or tighten up their range of motion, and they're not going to be able to do the things that they need to do as a dancer. And any good coach is going to say, what do you need to do? Let's keep you healthy and let's figure out how to get you there.
Yeah.
So
Would you say that's one of the biggest misconceptions that you see when it comes to cross training and conditioning, especially right now?
absolutely, absolutely, I see that, and I see dancers who are afraid to pick up a weight. And I will say, make sure everybody understands, I'm not a strength and conditioning coach. I wish I
Sure.
was, but my specialty is Pilates and rehab based exercises. So I know about it. I can give my dancers some of the exercises, but I'm definitely not trained the way a good strength and a certified strength and conditioning coach is. Um, and I hear all the time, well, I'd rather work with you because I don't want to get my muscles too bulky, or I don't want to, stop looking like a dancer. And I'm like, well, I want you to go train with a
Yeah.
trainer in
Yeah.
addition to the work that you do with me,
Yeah.
so that you can do the things you want to do. You want to get higher jumps, you want to have stronger legs to hold up that extension. That's going to be the best way to get it.
And that's a great segue into our next segment. But for those of you just joining, I'm Bree Zabrowski, co-founder and CEO of Apollo Performance Wear, chatting with our friend Jennifer Milner today about the difference between conditioning and cross training, and how do you know which to focus on when you're training. We're exploring that today. This is Beyond the Steps. So be sure to like, share, and subscribe this conversation. It's really important for us to get this content out into the community to facilitate healthy discussion, provide resources, and education-based research. So please do share, and thanks for watching. There's a lot more to go, so stay tuned in with us, and be sure to still share with your community as well. So that where we left off is a great segue into this question. So can anyone, because dance, we've said it time and time again, dance specifically is not regulated, right? There's no
Right.
certification required to teach dance, to lead dance, to start, even build a curriculum or a program. There's nothing required. They wear a lot of hats, sometimes self-proclaimed hats, right? But can anyone work cross training into the curriculum? What knowledge and skill level should be required if you're leading those types of movements? Do you need to be a certified strength and conditioning coach, or can a dance teacher facilitate these movements in their classes? And is there a point where it's better to bring a professional in to the studio to work with the dancers rather than doing it yourself? Or am I overblowing this and it's not a big deal at all?
Well, I mean, kind of the answer is all of those things.
Sure.
I appreciate how many hats dance teachers wear,
Sure.
and I know how much they have to do, from janitor to costume designer to choreographer, right? To, oh yes, also I need to teach them technique and help them be
Yeah.
dancers, right? Um, and I appreciate that they want to add strength training in, and I know a lot of my competition dancers, especially, strength and conditioning is a class, a very common class for
Yeah.
dancers to have, or it's built into like an extra long jazz class or contemporary class, and they'll
Yeah.
do 20 to 30 minutes of what they call strength and conditioning. And usually that is working core strength, and that is working arm strength and upper body strength for floor work and that sort of thing. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that they're trying to do it correctly and give them that extra strength. If possible, I would love to take that load off of them and have a person come in whose job it is to do that and to design it. Because when I go in and do a cross training class for a studio, I ask them to give me the whole year and let me have that year to do what I want to do with it, and not just say, okay, this week we're going to do abs, and that week we're going to do legs, and that week we're going to do glutes, and then we'll start all over again the next month. Because a good trainer is going to sit down with your schedule and say, when does your competition season start? When does Nutcracker start?
Yeah.
When do you really start pushing? And they're going to build the training accordingly. And that takes a lot of planning and a lot of forethought. And dance teachers may or may not have the time or the knowledge to be able to do that well, right? So if that's what they have the time and the budget for, it's great that they're trying to put those things in there. In a perfect world, I would love to have someone come in whose job it is to do those things for them.
Yeah, and it's a great point at planning for certain marks in the season. Having an entire year, it really is a process. It's not an instantaneous thing that you
Right.
just start putting this into practice and all of a sudden, bam, you're just a stronger, more conditioned dancer. It takes time and like you said, planning. So I love that. How can individuals, so there's two ways we go about this, right?
Hmm.
Training, we train individually. There's a lot of people that put the time in outside of group classes and performance and rehearsals, and they train themselves and they work on themselves. They work on solos, duos, trios. How can individuals determine which approach suits them best? And then what about for groups? How do we decide what we're doing for a group with all different levels and abilities in that group? I mean, there's some people whose bodies are just not meant to go a certain way. They only stretch so far, only can do so much. And
Hmm.
when you have a group setting, how do you train as a whole when you're talking about conditioning and strength training?
Right. So, and that's a great point. So, if I have a group setting, that's another great reason to have a professional come in. And there are lots of great people I can tell you to follow. Later
Yeah,
on, I can give you links to that
great.
because the people who do these classes, like Jason, Marissa Schaefer, Amy Werner, they go in and teach these classes, and they are really good at what they do, and they already know how to modify, and they already know how to restructure it. One person's squat is going to look very different from another person's squat just because of the way their hips are built. And so having that knowledge and being able to adapt it, having someone say, oh, my knee's been bothering me. Okay, so then anytime this exercise comes up, I'm going to have you modify by doing this. So a
Yeah,
group class can still be incredibly beneficial and still be somewhat tailored for the dancer, especially if you're doing it regularly, because then whoever's coming in to do it gets to know the dancers and gets to realize what does and doesn't
yeah,
work for them. And so I think that there's still a lot that can happen in a group class as far as tailoring it. Now, popping in for a workshop, that's a lot harder. And it's difficult to start building and making progress when you come in
yeah,
for a one time thing and leave. As far as individuals go, I like to start with strength, and what I do is can be classified as strength training as far as or as cross training, because with Pilates it doesn't have to look like ballet at all. It can be very different, but I also can incorporate those exercises to look a little bit more like ballet conditioning for them to figure out how to transfer it from the gym or from the clinic into the studio. So I think it's valuable to have someone who can help you make those transitions, whether you have a separate strength coach and a separate conditioning coach, or you have someone that can do both. As you're trying to find someone, I would say, what do you want that person for? Are you always having sore hips? Are you always having the teachers give you these same corrections and you're trying to figure out how can I fix those and what's wrong with them? Or are you like, I just need to get stronger. I need to get my stamina up. I always feel tired and my joints all feel draggy and maybe go at it from that point of view. The most important thing to me is finding someone who's going to be able to work with dancers well. They don't
yeah.
have to be a dancer, but finding someone who can work with them well. So I would start with who do I know out there that's good, and then whether or not they're conditioning or a strength or Pilates or gyro is secondary to that. I have people I recommend for strength training all the time. So if you start with me, I will help you get in with a strength coach. If you start with a strength coach and they say, "Man, you need a little tune up on some of these areas," um, go see Jennifer. And so finding just that one good person will help you
Building
find
your
the other
community.
person. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So am I correct in saying that whether you're an individual or group, you're going to have to tailor there's no standard plan that you can use in any given situation. It's going to be very customized. It's going to be different variations within a class if you're in a group setting for people of different capabilities. Is that
Mhm.
correct?
That is correct. And in general, I would say I would rather it lean towards cross training than
Yeah,
towards conditioning. So
interesting.
just adding a class in that is similar to dance or dance adjacent, I don't think is going to be the best bang for your buck if you only have space for one class.
Yeah, I love that. And then we're going to dive deeper into, what a solid, conditioning versus strength training um program looks like at the various levels in dance in the next segment. But just in general, I mean, you look at right now some dancers, it's technique, 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 turns and leaps, strength and conditioning. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like once a
Mhm.
week. Is once a week realistically enough if you're putting 4 to 5 days of dance in a week? Is that enough to see the results and generate results, or is it something that needs to be consistent and more?
That is such a good question, and a lot of it depends on if the once a week is the most efficient way to get what you need, and the age of the dancer as well,
Yeah.
because pre-professionals and students are going to train very differently than professional dancers. And the better question to me is, what does the rest of your schedule look like?
Yeah.
Does the rest of your schedule make efficient use of your time? Or are you doing 4 leaps and turns classes when the studio could schedule 2 leaps and turns classes that week and a strength training class as well? And the strength training class will make your leaps and turns better.
Yeah, and I think that the mentality that we're trying to get away from when it comes to parents as well as teachers is more is not more. Like
Right.
you like make that quality time that you're putting in with technique and put some of these other things in to round out their schedule and round out their training.
Mhm.
And I think that's a big hurdle that we're seeing. Um for those just joining, I'm Bree with Apollo. This is Beyond the Steps season 4. We're talking with our dear friend Jennifer Milner today about the differences between conditioning and cross training because they are used pretty interchangeably,
Mhm.
and but they are very different. And how do we know what to focus on in our training? Because it's very different, as we've learned today, for each person based on their level and their capability and what their body is made to do. Right. So Jennifer, with that, I want to talk about the role of conditioning and cross training at each level. So, I guess I want to start with recreational dance and other performance activities. At that recreational level, the kids that are going maybe one night a week, is it something we should even be focusing on with those kids, cross training and conditioning?
I mean, if they're going once a week, I think they need that time to be doing the classwork and the technique work.
Yeah.
So at that level, I don't know that there's really a need for it. They're not overloading their bodies so much, and they're not specializing,
Yeah.
right? They're not. When we talk about specialization, are you doing baseball 12 months out of the year, or do you do baseball for 3 months and swimming for 3 months and basketball for 6 months, right? So the body gets challenged in different ways. They're not specializing in dance because they're not doing it 10, 20 hours a week. So does the body need that extra support? I tend to think no, and I encourage them to just dig deep into their technique.
Yeah, yeah, great. Thank you. And then competitive dance, looking at when we get to the competitive dance, youth dance, and other performance sports, what about at that level? These are the kids that are getting into, 3, 5, 6 days a week that they're between, classes, rehearsals, competitions, and then the sub question of this is, does that schedule look different when we're getting closer to a competition? Is it important to change up the frequency as we have these bigger events coming up?
Mhm. Yeah, that's such a hard discussion, and you and I have talked about this before, is how to figure out programming that prepares the dancers as well as we can, and makes them comparable, right? Competitive, literally, to the other schools without burning them out and
Yeah,
without overloading them. And I know there's fear on the dance studio side of doing too little, because then teacher or parents
yeah,
might say, well, that studio is doing more, so they must be better and going to that studio, and you're trying to keep your teachers
sure,
financially.
sure.
Um, but when you're getting into that age range, the science says that a pre-professional dancer or a student, the optimum number of hours they should be dancing per week is however old they are. So a 14-year-old should be dancing 14 hours a week. And if they go over that, they are exponentially more likely to have an injury. I mean, that's the basis of the study, which I think was 2017, I want to say.
Yeah.
And that's shocking to some of the dancers who are doing 25, 30 hours a week. Can I get them to drop 15 hours? No. And I get that. Do they need augmentation for their training? Most of them do. And when you're at a competitive level, whether it's ballet or a competition studio, a lot of what they're doing is pretty similar from day to day. And you can say they're doing hip hop or contemporary or lyrical or all those things, but as you're tailoring it for a competition, there are certain moves, there are certain looks, there are certain feels that always come out. And so they're always going to be doing that. The flexible bodies are going to be doing all the back bends, the flexible legs are going to be doing all the needles. They're going to be doing those things. And so we need to help train them against that so that they're strong enough and healthy enough to be able to keep going. How many needles are done with the left leg in the air? Very, very few, right? So any strength training we could put in there would be great. And I would build it in at the beginning of the season. And as it gets closer to competition time, strength training starts to look more like dynamic stretches and release work and prepares them for whatever comes next.
And that's where having that professional is going to come in really handy, because they're going to know when it's time to ramp up, when it's time to pull back. And unfortunately with dance, when we're talking about the rigidity of a schedule, dance studios most times have other things going on. They have a million classes and different levels, and there's only certain blocks of time that are cut out for certain kids, and you really have to fit everything into that time slot, and something is inevitably going to have to give. And oftentimes it is the cross training, it is the strength and conditioning, it is all of those things that are considered extras, when really maybe they should be considered the more important of the two, right? So it's interesting. So then talk about professional dance and other athletics. So when we get to the professional world, this is a little bit different than competitive, because where competitive, it's a sort of a push and pull between the teacher and then the kid in their off time, and the parents and what they do extra to support their dancers, or if they're able to do something extra, versus at the professional level. Oftentimes we see that they have facilities, they have trainers, they have people that are helping take care of them. But oftentimes we see that happens at the point of injury, not before. And so do you feel like at the professional level, we're seeing enough attention on strength and conditioning and cross
Well,
training?
and there again, it's trying to change a fair amount of tradition, right? And trying to encourage that to change. I think it's talked about and I think it's encouraged, but it's not built into the dancer's schedule. And that's what's difficult. And to find a way to build a professional company's schedule so that there's 1 or 2 days a week that are lighter, like maybe they don't have to rehearse that much, those things like Nutcracker that they've done for 30 years. And I'm not telling people not to be rehearsed enough, but maybe there's an hour or two less, and the dancers have 2 hours in the morning or 2 hours in the afternoon to do what they need to do, whether it's going to do cross training, whether it's sitting in an ice bath, like whatever they feel like they need, they have the space to do it, and they have the space in their physical body, in their bucket, to do that without pushing themselves over the edge. Because we want to build someone up to be able to do snow. I use that analogy all the time, because snow is 9 to 11 minutes long. And we want them to have that stamina for it, but they're not going to get that stamina by just running snow over and over again. So we need to give them space in the schedule to be doing their swimming or their running or biking or whatever it is that's going to help them get there. And we can't say rehearse 10 hours a day and then go do something else to make yourself strong enough to do this. We have to give them the space.
You have to allow them the time to do those other things. And I think that might be the biggest issue and hurdle is like we said earlier, so much of the emphasis is on the technique and the rehearsing that we forget that other stuff is an important part too. So that's a great point. So a lot of times with shows like this, people watch and they get inspired and super inspired, and they're like, we're going to go and do all this now. Like, but it can also be very
Yeah.
overwhelming. So if someone is, if there's an educator out there or a director or teacher or a coach that wants to incorporate a more balanced approach to conditioning and cross training in their training curriculum and isn't sure how to get started, what do you recommend? Like step one, what is that thing that you recommend they do to sort of put that into practice? And I know I'm saying this like we're kind of headed into competition season in the dance world now. This is a really hard time to like just make changes to a schedule that's been in place since, August or September. But the new year is a good time. This is when we start thinking about what that new dance season is going to look at. So these are things that we want to be thinking about now. How do they go about getting that in? Do they ask their teachers, "Hey, are you comfortable teaching this? Are you qualified to teach this?" What is that step?
And that's a great question. And I think this is the perfect time of year to think about it. As you said, it's the new year. But as you're going into
Yep.
competition season, just start to take note. When do the dancers fall apart? When do they say it's too much?
Yeah.
When do the parents start to look ragged and resentful and unhappy and saying, my daughter's always hurt? She's always
Usually
injured.
about
Yeah,
November.
exactly. My daughter's always injured and stressed out. And, so start to make note
Yeah.
of that. When does your schedule feel super duper squeezed? And then at the end of the year, send out a form, make it anonymous and say, what would you like to see different? Like, would you take advantage of strength training class? Would you take advantage if we had a private coach here that could work with whoever wanted to sign up during these hours? Like, how can we help facilitate that and gather more information then? Right now, I think it's a great idea to start asking your teachers, what do you feel comfortable and qualified to teach? Where can we make the schedule more efficient? As I said before, maybe we take out one of the leaps and turns classes and put in a strength class instead of that. I know it's really hard to drop some of those classes, but just look at what's going to make them a healthier, more competitive, like physically able to compete at a higher level dancer. So where can we adjust that schedule a little bit? And then I would also say start to clean up your social media and start to look for people who are really good at what they do and follow them and see how they do it. My friends post all the time. They say, I did this and this is why.
Fantastic
I did that
content.
and this
Yeah.
is why. And you'll start to see patterns and you'll start to be like, oh, so maybe I should look at that. Maybe I should try to get certified in this. And I think if you have great science expert based social media Instagram accounts to follow, I think that you're going to learn a lot and you're going to start to see those patterns and be like, oh, I could do this or I could do that. So as crazy as it
Yeah,
sounds,
there's
it'll
so
help.
many accounts. Yeah, so many accounts out there that are like they have videos of exercises that you can do for a very specific thing or targeting a specific goal, and tons of evidence-based, science-based accounts, like you said, that are out there right now. And I'm sure we can talk about some of those at the end. But that's a great resource. That could not be more true. So this is a great segue into homework. We like to give our guests homework every episode, one small step that they can take between now and next week to make progress in this way. So somebody that really says, I need to get some cross training, strength and conditioning into my training regimen. What is that one step that they should take first and foremost?
Start to gather information. I think it's really great
Yeah.
to ask your friends who go off and do cross training or strength training or conditioning and say, what do you do? How do you find the time? How does it make you feel? And think to yourself, what do I want to get out of it? You really want to find somebody, like I said, word of mouth is the best way because then they are out there giving you that firsthand feedback rather than just finding someone blindly. So start to gather that information and figure out what do I want out of it, and what's the best way to get that. And if it's personal, like private, let's start looking in that direction. If it's group, let's start looking in that direction. But then ask your friends and figure out where in your schedule you could try to find the time to do that.
Yeah, and I think if you're an educator, this is sort of like a sub homework assignment, but if you're an educator, there's a couple things. Your parents might want to support you and might want to do these things with their athlete, their performance athlete. They just might not know how or how to get started. So you might find very willing participants in those parents that will support in the off time if you kind of give them some guidance. But the other thing I would say, and this is something we repeat on the show over and over and over. Build your network in your
Mhm.
community. If you're an educator, director, coach, find those PTs, those movement specialists, the people, the CSCS, certified strength and conditioning coaches, and make sure you find them, and so that you can call them and say, "Look, I've got a group of dancers that you could come in and do a class. Possibly gain more clients from that directly. Maybe they give you a discounted rate to come in and do that. But there's so many things that can be done as far as cross promotion and just building that relationship, so that you don't have to, as Jennifer said, wear that hat. You can take that off and give it to somebody else. And when you have a problem at your studio or you're noticing a pattern, you call this person in and go, okay, this is what we're seeing. How do we address this? And you have that person, that lifeline that you can call on when you're in those situations, and it doesn't all fall on your shoulders.
Absolutely. And that, I think that's a great piece of homework for studio owners and teachers. If you find someone like me and call me to come in, I said a one-time workshop, I'm not going to be able to strengthen them the way I would through a year. But if that's what you can do schedule wise and financially, that's totally fine. You bring someone like me in, I get to know the dancers. The dancers that want to will pursue a one-on-one training with me, perhaps. But more importantly, we form a relationship, and then 3 months later, you are noticing that all of your dancers are getting tendonitis in their calves for some reason. You don't know why, but then you can call me and say, "Hey, this is happening. Could we do a workshop that
Yeah.
might address that?" And then you've got someone that you can work with. A strength coach can do the same thing and say, "All right, let's talk about this, this, and this." And so even if it's not every week, you've got a relationship with someone who can fill in the gaps for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And our homework is the same every week for you here on Beyond the Steps. We want you to take our Steps Initiative course. If you haven't done it already, this is a great piece of education that you can take individually. You can share it with your staff, your parents, your students, even. It is the hypothesis for this whole podcast. It is how we started this whole thing, this little project that we have with Beyond the Steps. It is a virtual course that you can take, go at your own pace. And it's going to tackle everything from racism, gender and equity, sex abuse and prevention, nutrition, psychology, and dance medicine and science. And it is evidence-based research. It is laying a foundation for you to do more work on your own. But when you know better, you do better. And that is why we started this show. So please, please take this course. It is free. I cannot stress that enough. Jennifer, how can people get in touch with you? Because I know you do a lot of work. You do some virtual work as well, do you
Mhm.
not?
I do. I
Okay.
have dancers all across the world that I work with one-on-one on Zoom. So, and I even do group stuff on Zoom sometimes for companies. But you can reach out to me on Instagram. I'm at Jennifer period Milner, Milner, and my Facebook, or not my Facebook. I don't really update that, but my
Mhm.
website is Jennifer hyphen Milner. So they're different. I'm not sure why, but that's the way it is.
.com.
Yes.com.
Wonderful. And I am going to put that in the chats for you guys so that you can contact Jennifer. Jennifer, thank you so much for being here and for having this conversation. I think it's so important to continue over and over and over to have these conversations so that we see change happen in the curriculum. These dancers are doing so much now. And as you said earlier, dancing, more hours than is recommended for their age. And so we want to see these dancers continue doing what they love longer and stronger for many, many years to come. So they're not in their 40s feeling like they're just crippled at
Right.
this point. So thank you for being here and sharing your insight and your time. We always appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me back again.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. And for all of you out there, Beyond the Steps is every Friday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. You can find us on YouTube and Facebook every single episode, season 1 through 4, at Apollo Performance and TP Dance Creations. If you have an idea for a topic or a guest you want to see on our show, DM us. We want to hear from you, or you can email us info@apolloperformance.com. Join us next week as we welcome back our friend Leah Bueno to talk about relative rest and how dance educators support dancers during injury. Another very important conversation, and one we don't emphasize enough. So it's going to be a good one. Join us. Until then, we hope you continue your journey beyond the